I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Daly people of the Wiradjuri Nation, and to pay my respects to the elders past and present. I'd also like to welcome you all to Kandos. If you don't live here already, thank you for coming, and I'd like to welcome you to Futurelands. This is really exciting. It's amazing to see so many people here, so passionate about land and issues around land. I've been asked to introduce this, our second public forum on the changing relationship to land, and to give it a little context to the diverse conversation we'll be engaged in over this weekend. The story of its inception, like any good story, could be told from a number of perspectives, but I thought I'd begin from the perspective of an artist. To speak a bit about how and why a group of artists would come to produce a public forum on land. If we're successful, we'll be talking most of the time about land, and maybe a little bit about art. So I thought I'd use this opportunity to introduce art into the frame through which we perceive our subject and allow it to be considered in its oblique and ancillary role. So Anne Finnegan is one of the directors, co-directors of Samantha Festival. She originally conceived of the idea of Futurelands. The first Futurelands was about 15 people sitting around at Kandos projects. We were talking about the impacts of coal to small communities and to the environment. We have since expanded considerably and diversified as well, which has been a real win. And this is mostly due to the energy, the very significant energy of 5 artists and 2 academics, Ian Millis, Lucas Eileen, Laura Fisher, myself, Diego Bonetto, Gilbert Grace, and Anne Finnegan. Got everybody. Okay. And we all came together under under the banner of a fictional, and in quotes fictional, educational institution called the Kandos School of Cultural Adaptation. The term cultural adaptation refers to an idea that Ian Millis has been banging on about for some decades now, that if art can be seen as an activity that functions specifically to adapt culture to the changing conditions of social reality, then any activity that changes culture can be seen as art. The paradigmatic example first chosen by Ian is that of P.A. Yeomans, an agricultural innovator who developed radical new ways of farming, and in doing so changed the culture of farming and more broadly altered the way we as a society conceptualize and thus interact with the land. This is only one example, and the idea of cultural adaptation applies across the span of human endeavor to any activity that changes culture, either in particular or in general. This idea is exciting for an artist because it offers the opportunity for art to leave its white-walled garden and participate in the world not as a rarefied intellectual or aesthetic production, but as an embedded cultural practice that can be applied at any point at which change manifests it across the spectrum itself, across the spectrum of human culture. If culture is coextensive with society and as diverse, plural, and many-faced, then why is it that we assume its change is only wrought within the specialized pressure chambers of high art and academia? It seems to me more logical that if culture changes, it changes along all of its articulations, at every level, in every molecule and atom of which it is composed. And if the adaptation of culture is a field of activity particular and specialized in the artist, is there not something the artist can contribute to these points of cultural change? What would it mean to bring the conceptual repertoire, the strategies and methods for shifting perception and challenging convention developed within the specialized field of art to bear on points of cultural change outside of it? And also, is there not something that art can learn from such encounters? These questions inform the foundation of ksca, and to a degree they were gratified at their inception. Now, I'm not sure that Stuart Andrews is here this morning, because I was going to be embarrassing him with a story, but never mind, we'll have to do that without him. When I first met Stuart to basically propose this idea of partnering his natural sequence farming project with a group of artists, basically the way he introduced himself to us was, well, I'm no artist. He said that to us. And it was funny because we had approached him for the very fact that we considered him an artist. And so but actually broaching that was a little bit of a, kind of, I didn't know, do you spring it on him now, or do we just, give him a little bit of time to work up to it? But it wasn't long after that first meeting that he absolutely proved us correct. This took place, as he introduced us to his technique and to the method that he used. Sorry about this. The work he's doing on Marlou is an activity as essentially creative as anything performed in the studio. His method is experimental and material. Ideas are applied to the land, tested, and evolved. As with art, risk-taking and failure are an essential part of the process. But it's the way that Stuart talks about disseminating the technique and the body of knowledge that it generates that most vividly drew my attention. Stuart thinks and talks about language with the same passion that he thinks and talks about the land. In contrast to his father's more oppositional approach towards forces which resist his innovation, Stuart considers and works within the given parameters, the language and policy landscape of the society he seeks to change. Rather than directly challenge the status quo to an unlikely duel, he works with the legal and linguistic landscape as it exists to gain approval for his method and demonstrate its value to government regulators, policymakers, and other farmers. In other words, he's adapted the principle of natural sequence farming, that of working with the land instead of against it, to the arena of culture. If this is not the work of an artist, then I don't know what the work of an artist is. In a sense, Stuart has anticipated the strategy underpinning our school of cultural adaptation. For what else are we doing when we take this existing word artist and we stretch it over an object that does not conventionally carry its meaning? And I think this is why we find ourselves here today. I wanted to start with Stuart because he's really been, the introduction to this. And one of the things is that this school and this idea is, I think, quite broad and can go anywhere. Whereas we're focusing on land now, but I think there are 100 different arenas in which it can be applied. And I also think as well that all of the people we'll be listening to today and engaging with, I look forward to discovering, that artist that is what you are doing, and actually exploring that as the art of cultural change. So thank you very much. Welcome to Futurelands.